think the world is waking up. We're seeing an expanded consciousness worldwide that really fills me with a lot of hope, especially when you saw the American people and the people worldwide stand up and say, enough is enough, and we don't want this attack on Syria. To me, that was emblematic of a shift in consciousness we're facing worldwide, and something that can make all of us smile a little bit because the people are waking up. And since we last spoke, Alex, I've just been working on this book, and it's been a crazy but exciting journey. And I think the book is super important because I saw that the mainstream media was demonizing protest and making people think that protesters didn't have a sound message and protest was a waste of time. And I published this book to remind the American people that protest has been the common denominator for change throughout history. And if we want things to change, we're going to have to stand up and fight for our rights, Alex.
Well, you're absolutely right, Amber. And I know that since you've been on with us, you've been traveling the world and doing investigative journalism in some dangerous situations. Tell us about some of your latest exploits.
Well, as of now, I've been traveling investigating natural medicines. I feel like a lot of these medicines are being demonized, and not only that, they're being withheld from the American public in what I consider to be one of the greatest human rights tragedies of our generation. And so I've been, since March of last year, I've literally been on the road nonstop investigating these medicines, and I'm currently writing a book for people to show them how they can access them instead of just relying on prescription drugs, which are, as you know, Alex, you talk about this a lot on your show, turning the nation into zombies and addicts as well. One of my last stories I did for CNN was on these babies being born addicted to prescription medications. This NICU in East Tennessee literally had to build an extra wing just to handle all these babies being born addicted, and that's a story that's not being covered enough as well that I'm going to be covering in the book too.
Wow.
But in addition to that, I finished up covering protests across the U.S. I traveled the U.S. for a year covering the Occupy protests, covering teacher protests, home foreclosure protests, really just any event where the little guy was standing up for his rights.
Talk to us about the nature of where you see the First Amendment as an award-winning journalist who's trained in understanding it, with the way the free speech zones operate, the way the riot police operate, the way this culture is converting to what we see in third world countries and dictatorships, quite frankly, but they're still branding it as freedom because we went up to cover JFK and we're totally peaceful and we're physically attacked, punched, hit, you name it, for peacefully being there. The Dallas police said, no, you have a right to be here, First Amendment. And then the feds had the deputized sheriff's deputies physically attack us. And they looked like people out of central casting from a maximum security prison who did attack us. And it's just, you don't want to think bad of the police. You want to believe in the system. But when it becomes tyrannical in your face, you're a fool to deny it. So your book, incredible photojournalism in here, and firsthand accounts that it goes through. Talk about the state of the First Amendment in this country.
Well, it's in a disturbing state right now, Alex. Like you were describing, we're seeing a rampant amount of police militarization to the point that people are being intimidated to even hit the streets and protest. One of the protests I covered in the book, the Anaheim police brutality protest, ironically enough, the people were protesting against police brutality when the police started opening fire on crowds of women and children using less lethal rounds, which we all know can be lethal if they hit you in the head or in the wrong location. And I was even fired at by the Anaheim Police Department as I was standing in the middle of a busy street photographing a dumpster that had been set on fire. A wall of police started firing up on me, and I had to run. I was in such shock because, as you mentioned, Alex, I have traveled all around the world covering protests in countries that we consider to be run by dictators and we consider to be more dangerous than the U.S., but I have never been directly shot at like that in my entire career. And I was just in shock, and I had to run between two trucks to avoid being hit. And when I emerged from the truck screaming press, one of the officers said to me, "Don't you know how to cover a protest? You need to stand back here." And he pointed behind the police line where all the other journalists were corralled. And I believe I was fired upon because they didn't want me out there documenting these injuries. I had photographs of pedestrians who'd been hit in the back of their legs with these projectiles. And not only that, one of the next days when the protesters hit the streets, police showed up dressed in full camo gear, Alex. That was another double take I had to do. I felt like I was in Egypt. They were wearing camouflage clothing and camo and military boots and heavily armed for a protest that it was almost a joke. Like you either had to laugh or cry because this protest consisted mostly of Hispanic women and children who were unarmed. We're just seeing a disturbing rate of this police militarization, and I definitely expose that in the book because it just became a common thread in all of these protests, Alex, and people like to believe we have the freedom to exercise our First Amendment rights in the United States, but when you have police directly intimidating protesters, then we're not able to do so. And I know a lot of police are good. You know, police officers, many of them do get in the field to protect our freedoms, but they're doing the exact opposite. And as a failure...
Well, that's right. The directive from on top is towards authoritarianism. And as you know, our government and the special interests that control it are on record all over the world trying to put authoritarian regimes in because they want to manage and extract the resources. They're treating us exactly the same. So this is a top-down operation.
Exactly. And where's the outrage, Alex? Like, why? This is what I don't understand. Why aren't the people saying enough is enough and really standing up and fighting back against this police militarization? This is a slippery slope. And we're seeing this, I mean, even from when I started covering the protests in September 2011 to now, look at the change in the police attire. Police are now heading to these protests dressed like they're in some Judge Dredd movie. And I think they're doing that because they're getting away with it. The American public is allowing this to happen and sitting back and not standing up for our rights.